Stephen Cooper, Building an Accessible Internet of Things World.
Hello, how's everyone going? So I normally open my talk. This is my 126th talk. Fun fact. Who's counting, right? Apologies in advance. I just got back from the US a few days ago, and I managed to get altitude sickness. Altitude sickness sucks. Just saying. Anyway, I'm still recovering from that, so I may cough a few times. But anyway, we're going to try not to. I normally open these things with a developer joke. Who wants to hear a dev joke? Yay! I have 150 of them, but we're not doing all those today. How many developers does it take to screw in a light bulb? None. It's a hardware problem. Oh, someone always knows that. So I have a backup because there's someone already knows that, usually knows that one, but how many testers does it take to screw in a light bulb? None. They just prove darkness exists. It's someone else's job to fix it. Yay! Hello everyone. So yeah, I am developer Steve. I am a developer evangelist representing usually a whole bunch of really big tech companies, but today I'm just here as me because, well, this is a topic that's passionate to me as a maker, as a dev, as a geek, as someone that does 3D printing and sort of submits 3D prints back all the time. This is just a topic of interest of me, particularly as IoT as an industry has matured and sort of started to really find its feet, particularly in some of the industry categories we've started to see. So let's go on a journey into a world filled with tiny little low-powered devices connecting things all around us and being able to facilitate whole new experiences in the world, essentially. As a technologist, dev, and all-round geek, I love IoT. It is the endless possibility of things that enables developers, dreamers, and those that dare to build and imagine new and exciting, seamless experiences that can be built into the world around us. As a dev, it moves my online world offline and allows me to create some seamless user experiences. And it already is enabling things around us, from interactive displays to opening doors to turning on lights. It's already building some things out around us that really enables some really exciting new solutions. Particularly as a dev, I really love the human element that can be added into everyday objects to help us interact with the world around us in whole new ways. This is the Jibo, which hasn't completely gone on sale yet, but essentially it's a very personal human experience device, not much different to like an Alexa or a Google Home, except it has a personality. As a human, I can relate to this object. I can look at it, I can see it has some type of emotion. I can relate to it as a human and as a user. This is the stuff that really excites me as a technologist because it really starts to allow people to be able to relate to the things around them and interact in new ways. But not only that, there are projects like the Phoenix exoskeleton being able to help people with mobility issues and being able to interact again in whole new ways to the world around them. This is a project that I've been following for a few years. It came out of some accelerators in 2014, and it's really started to mature as the technology's enabled it to do so. So as things have gotten smaller, things have gotten more interactive, batteries have become better. It enables people to be able to explore the world in whole new ways. As the owner of a 3D printer, I also love things like this, which is enabling the future. So this is the collaborative printing of prosthetics, open source prosthetics that allows not only for people to be able to contribute back and make them better, faster, stronger, cheaper, lighter, but being able to also print components and collaboratively as a community be able to help offer free prosthetics to people in whole new ways. So we're already seeing the way that industry as a whole is reacting to IoT and how it's being built into different industry categories. So if you think smart cities, it's parking meters, it's being able to build collaborative experiences in connected things around us. What I hope as this starts to build out more, particularly in smart cities, that open source, secure platforms start to become more commonplace, so multiple experiences can be built together. And what I mean by that is having the platform open for people to be able to access and use the same hardware embedded into the city for multiple experiences. So if you think about wayfinding apps, or being able to facilitate location finding things, or even just be able to interact with parking meters, like the hardware already exists in the space. As a dev, I like to be able to use things for multiple purposes, for multiple reasons. And a number of devices around us are growing. So some statistics on screen now from Statistica predict there'll be 23 billion connected devices this year, which basically works out to around 3 devices per person. Now, I know I've got my quota on that because at home I have 2 Google Homes in a 2-bedroom apartment, 2 LiftX bulbs, an IR blaster. There's probably a couple. Oh, and the blinds are connected. So just because, well, just because it's cool, and like, why wouldn't I? I'm actually looking to take that to one of my other favorite projects. A side note from the slides is FarmBot. So this is an open source. Oh, you found it. Thank you. This is an open source project that it basically turns your balcony into an automated gardening system. Essentially, it will look after itself. It actually plants its seeds, it weeds the garden, it waters the plants, and it's all automated. The best part is it's all stuff you can buy off the shelf at Bunnings, 3D print, and just buy from local IoT supplier, like a couple of Raspberry Pis and an Arduino. And it's fully open source. So there's a community behind this stuff, like being able to contribute back and make this stuff better. The best part is it's not only applicable to this world, but you can think the same thing can be used on Mars or remote places that we haven't been yet, and it's a little bit dangerous for us to go to. Like, these things can be sent ahead of time and be able to build stuff out. And I can build it on my balcony. It's amazing. Anyway, I digest. As a DevOps, this is really cool, and I spoke last week at Atlanta about this at the NGINX conference, but in the internet, there's a saying in the IoT world, in the Internet of Things, nobody knows you're a fridge. And it's true for developers because you're going to be... I actually secretly love this one too. For developers, like, you don't know if you're going to be dealing with a fridge, a button, a person, like a vacuum cleaner, you don't know what you're going to be dealing with in the future. And some of the use cases I heard last week in Atlanta where there were people teams dealing with billions of hits a day just from web traffic, let alone the 23 billion devices that will be sort of happening and connected by the end of this year. The industry as a whole, the IoT industry as a whole, is still maturing. And this is partly because they've faced challenges with connectivity. So if you think of a connected door, an IoT-enabled door that has no connectivity, no Wi-Fi, no Cat M1 or no internet, like, it's very hard to interact with. So as the devices, and I brought some props with me that I can hold up. As the devices have become more and more refined, more and more smaller, miniaturized essentially, and cheaper, the connectivity side of it has struggled to keep up because there wasn't any standard protocol for how these devices connect. And what I mean by that is I'm holding up a device, basically a palm-sized Arduino circuit at the moment. So this is an Arduino Yuan, and essentially this is one of the first Wi-Fi enabled devices. I bought this in 2014. They were about $70. Very, very limited in how it could connect, and very, very power hungry. Of course, it's using Wi-Fi. 6 months later, I'm now holding up a device the size of a postage stamp. Actually, it's probably smaller. I haven't bought a postage stamp for a while. But yeah, 6 months later, I'm buying an ESP8266-1. It's so easy to remember. It just rolls off the tongue. For $6, and it has Wi-Fi, and it has a temperature sensor, and it has touch sensor. Over the course of the next 12 months, there was 15 versions of this that came out that got smaller and cheaper and more enabled and more coverage. It was phenomenal to see the industry move so fast in the way that it took the idea and it was very quickly adopted because it suddenly solved a few problems. It solved size, power, and also connectivity. But of course, Wi-Fi doesn't reach everywhere, and these devices still depended on having a Wi-Fi access point nearby. That was kind of at this point in 2015 where we started to see sort of edge-based device connectivity start to rise. So Sigfox, LoRaWAN, it was essentially private proprietary networks that started to spring up to try and solve the problem of connectivity. And it did lead to the conundrum of which came first, network or the device, or the chicken-egg conundrum, as I call it. Thankfully, 2016, and this is what I love about open source communities, is they rally behind something that they know is a problem, and all of a sudden you start to get standardization in protocols and a standard way for, particularly in the telecommunications industry, to be able to handle these devices to connect. Previously, you'd have to use something like LTE, the straight-up LTE networks, which at an IoT level, when you're talking something something really, really small, something the size of a postage stamp, needing a great deal of power to be able to connect into a full-blown mobile connected network. The 2016 3GPP standardization started to solve that problem because it started to create low-powered IoT-enabled networks. In Australia, we have two of them, a Cat M1 network and a narrowband network. What it enables is devices, really tiny little devices, to be able to connect in and get internet connectivity without needing the huge amount of power or infrastructure to run it. And it's very open and in an agnostic way. Of course, this meant the industry as a whole was egg static, and there is a pun there on that slide with eggs and egg incubator. I actually saw, so a lot of the hackathons I've run over the years, I actually have seen a few various projects build out with dealing with particularly farm tech or agri-tech and incubation. So you can actually monitor the development of eggs and when they hatch, etc. So this is cool. What that meant industry-wise is we've suddenly had connectivity in whole new ways. So in 2016, when the first Cat 0 networks went live, we were basically dealing with something the size of, well, 3 Raspberry Pis put together, or 2 hand lengths in size with 2 antennas to be able to connect into this network. This year, we've seen them shrink even smaller, and I actually didn't bring one with me, but essentially half the size of what we were dealing with in the Wi-Fi networks, probably about 7 centimeters in length, really, really, really cheaply, being able to connect into the networks now, into the Cat M1 and narrowband networks. I'm not going to go into sort of the stuff that sits behind that, but essentially the connection was just the beginning of that. And essentially because these devices are so low powered and so, they're not very smart devices, I'm going to share that with you. They're basically, the connecting in was just the beginning. So beyond the connection, you also have to deal with device management. If you think about having 100,000 devices connected to network, you have to be able to manage that they're still connected, they're still in the location that you hope they should be in. Plus you have to do things like over-the-air updates. There are platforms to be able to, and ways to be able to deal with that, but it's definitely something that is the next sort of iteration to deal with, particularly when you're dealing with devices en masse. You think 23 billion devices connected at the end of this year, you need to manage those and be able to update them without needing to go visit them literally back out in the field. And sometimes they will actually be in a field. One of the more exciting things, and I'm interested to see how this plays out industry-wise, this year Android Things went to version 1. And what that meant was that essentially something the size of a Raspberry Pi or something that would fit into the size of your hand suddenly had some really interesting capabilities. The device itself runs full-blown Android, which means all the third-party libraries from the Android world suddenly work on something the size of a Raspberry Pi. If you think TensorFlow Mobile, you can actually do some stuff without needing network connectivity to be able to do image detection between 2 different image sets. And that's just the beginning. Everything from payments right through to anything from the Android third-party libraries will suddenly work out in the field, out in the real world. So you can do some stuff without needing any connectivity. But just to reiterate that again, the IoT devices are basically only as smart as the libraries that power them, which is why the community involvement with a lot of these projects is very, very critical to being able to build out functionality, particularly in the accessibility space, to be able to make the Internet of everything the Internet of everyone. And special mention to some of the stuff Ross was talking about in the voice-enabled things. This is something that's been playing on my mind for a while as well. I bought a $18 IR blaster earlier in the year and hooked it up to my Google Home. The interesting part with it is, unless I specifically say the thing that I have programmed it to do, it will not know how to do it. Which started to get me thinking, because it was training me more than I was training it. And if I say something simple as, hey Google, turn on lights, that will work differently to, hey Google, turn on light. It won't know, it won't understand, because the library behind it hasn't enabled it to be able to understand the difference between the two. And this is my point, is interacting with things around us as a human versus it training us to interact as a robot. So if we look at some of the W3C, and this is straight from the website, I have a link at the bottom to be able to link to that. But if we look at some of the W3C guidelines for IoT accessibility, it's a little light. And I think this is where, as a community, we need to start helping them understand how this stuff should be built out and how the rules behind it need to be able to help us build human experiences. So if we look at the rules, that IoT/WOT systems need to provide specific accessibility features to address the needs of people with different disabilities. Totally agree. The connected projector provides access to the presentation data in addition to the video output. A connected TV provides support for captions. All hardware controls can be provided through the web interface or API. Then the fourth point is ... As an IoTist, I'm a little disappointed with that. I mean, I get it. The industry itself is still maturing, but I was kind of hoping for like a whole bunch more there. And thankfully, like these pages and these communities are all open source, so they're open to suggestions. And particularly, I think in the IoT space, as it's tried to find its footing in the world of smart cities and connected things, I can see this needing a lot of help to be able to build this out. There's another section on that same page around accessibility guidelines. It kind of goes into a little bit more detail, and it actually acknowledges that more work needs to be done in this. So new considerations may be needed in future accessibility standards and guidelines to better address IoT/WOT. WOT stands for World of Things. Context. And then it goes on to say, an individual component, such as a headset, may not address all accessibility requirements. Yes, that's true. The combination of individual components needs to provide an accessibility system. Totally true. An IoT WOT system needs to provide basic platform accessibility, and individual components needs to adhere to it. But again, it kind of ended in ... So again, like, they need help with this stuff because they need to understand first what the industry capabilities can do, and then how they can enhance the overall human interface experience. In my mind, a button isn't always a button, isn't always a button. An experience sitting on a podium in a crowded shopping center doesn't mean anything unless there's a sign or some way to interact with it. A working example how I could see this stuff working, and particularly in a way that everyone can enjoy and be able to connect to and experience. If you think, how a lot of these IoT connected things work is there's what's known as an IoT broker or an IoT server running somewhere in the world that these devices can access. Essentially, if you think of it like a really basic low-powered messaging system, these devices come online, register themselves as an experience, as a device connected to that server, and then subscribe to a topic, and then sit and wait. So essentially, they keep looking for this topic running on a server that other devices can connect into. So in the case of a button sitting in a crowded shopping center, there's no reason why it can't also be connected to a wearable device, a mobile device, or something that allows multiple people to be able to access that particular experience. You don't necessarily have to push the button to activate it on the actual device itself. You could quite easily trigger that from just about anything that you needed to from anywhere, which is why building something like an API-driven first experience comes in handy, because you can literally build that into anything you need to build. The overall key for this is building for mass scale. There's another pun there. That everyone can use. And sort of just wrapping up, I told you, I'll describe the image. Oh, sorry. There's an IoT connected scale with a mobile device sitting on the actual scale itself on this slide. Just to give some context to the pun. Further reading, so these are some really useful articles that I've seen floating around the internet. So IoT and accessibility, there's a really good article by Marley Ritter, who's a UX designer specializing in accessibility. There's some really good stuff in there, particularly around building dual experiences where you can have multiple experiences basically connecting into the one server via APIs, via MQTT, etc. The other one I found was IoT devices. Why accessibility should be your first priority. This particularly goes into building accessibility first, which I completely agree with, and everyone should be doing, but of course everyone in this room knows that. And just to finish up on one of my favorite quotes, the three most interesting things in the world are a programmer with a soldering iron, a hardware type with a program patch, and a user with an idea. In today's world, that's everyone. Like, there's no reason why you can't build some really, really cool stuff in the real world, on the online world, in the cloud, like wherever you want to build it, like there's nothing stopping us from doing that. And that's basically me. Thank you very much.
Thank you. All the cool tech. We've probably got about 2 minutes for questions.
And I did that without coughing once.
You did.
Microphone, please.
Steve,
I got that mixed up.
Got one simple question, and it really touches on the last bit. From your reading of the accessibility IoT, is it a more universal approach for accessibility, or is it more targeted for certain sectors?
Yeah, interesting. Good, really good question. And I think this is going to be, and something that I've given a lot of thought to, mostly because it's going to depend on the IoT experience being built out. So not everything is going to need to be a button in the IoT world. It could be something you interact with. I think building with accessibility in mind first is kind of form out to just about anything else you're going to do on the project, except maybe power. You need to get these things power. But particularly, I think you can handle the connection to the actual device and the interaction to the device on multiple of ways and be able to help everyone essentially. Ideally, end of the day, as an IoTist, like we're building the internet of everyone, not everything necessarily. If that makes sense.
We've just about run out of time. I know there was one more question at the back, but we might need to stop there.
I'll be around.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Alley Camp, October 2018.